Hello! Today we're going to do a deep dive into the Magic the Gathering story from Secret of Strixhaven off the record. This is the real Secret of Strixhaven. In my perusing online, I've noticed that no one's picked up on a few things about this story. This story is an absolute fascinating tale that has a lot of questions and potential answers buried within the words. And what it all gets down to is one big question. Who really is Ral Zarek? Rather, the question is, this Ral Zarek specifically that we see at the Strixhaven School as a guest lecturer, he is not who he appears to be. So let's start by talking a little bit about the story. Ral Zarek is being interviewed by two students, Jalessa and Esmond, as part of a school assignment from one of the professors there. The interview process leads into Ral Zarek saying that he thinks that he sees some of his younger self in Jalessa and would really benefit from her services on a project of his. This project involves locating a book that is on the foundations of the Elder Dragons from the Strixhaven world. The group sets off to the Biblioplex, where they get in touch with Codex Vocifera. The Codex reveals that the book's location has been redacted. Jalessa and Esmond perform a ritual of which Ral inserts energy into to assist, and through that ritual they locate the book as being at the mystical archive of the Vaults of Turau. This vault has been used by the Founding Dragons to secure Blood Age artifacts for, and I quote, safety reasons. After this, the three set off, heading straight to the mountains where this vault can be located. The vault is protected by a magical maze that performing incorrect turns or passages will result in teleporting you back to the start and depleting your energy. The field is littered with skeletons of previous attempts of individuals attempting to get into the vault. Jalessa and Esmond use some magic, and with that magic they send Inklings to discover exactly where the turns are in this maze. And with that, they're able to walk to the entrance. In the course of walking towards the entrance, the skeletons come to life and begin to attack the three of them. The skeletons are defeated, and they unlock the vault, head inside. The vault is protected by some artifact guardians, some large entities that are designed to protect its contents from being taken, and they remain inert until the book is located. Ral Zarek picks up the book, which activates the security system, flips through, confirms that it has information that he's looking for, even though it isn't exactly what he wanted, and then he plane shifts out after explaining to the two that they were very easy to manipulate. And this is where the story ends. Presumably the two are killed by the security system, though we don't actually see the results. For anyone that is familiar with Ral Zarek, this is clearly not him. It doesn't really fit his personality. Ral Zarek is a protector of the people. He's not the kind of person that would manipulate like that to get what he's after and then leave people to die. So it's easy to say this isn't Ral Zarek. But the question, who is it then, if this isn't Ral Zarek? The main theory online is that this is an Echoverse version of Ral Zarek. This is a solid theory. It's not the only theory, but it is a solid one. So let's talk about some of the evidence that supports that. Well, the most obvious example of this is the change in personality. Another very obvious change in this is if you look at the card Ral Zarek Guest Lecturer. Ral Zarek is a blue-red planeswalker typically, but the Ral Zarek Guest Lecturer card is black. And if you look at the previous Lorwyn Eclipse story at the very end, we had a different colored Liliana show up in it. We had a white Liliana. And if set releases will show that there's going to be echoes of each of the characters in the sets. So it is quite possible that we are looking at the Echoverse version of Ral Zarek. But is that really it? There's not a lot of other evidence that would suggest that. It is the same person in appearance, and presumably there's a lot of pieces of information that would suggest it. But a lot of that is literary techniques that are designed to hide things and to provide bits of solutions were there if you knew where to look. Very commonly used in mystery tropes. But what about the evidence against it? There's quite a bit. First off, how is Ral Zarek at the school? This may seem like an unusual question, but let's go back and think about this for a second. He is a professor according to another one of the professors there. And at the very beginning of the story, we have a conversation where they are questioning why he's there. I'll go ahead and I'll read you a quote from it. Why is he here? Does it have something to do with Professor Vess or that planeswalker Goldmane? If so, how is he involved? What do you intend to do? Not much of a quote there, but it does raise the question that the students don't know and the professors don't know why he's there, and he's presumed to be there because of either Ajani or Liliana. But there's problems with that. You see, Liliana has been missing since the end of Lorwyn Eclipsed. Let's look at that quote. This quote comes from Chapter 2 of the Secret of Strixhaven story, Travels and Travails. In this, we hear a conversation between Fel and Jadzia that Lewin overhears. I have my own thoughts as to the causes. Professor Vess and I were due to discuss them, Fel answered. The fire was seeping out of him. Jadzia winced. About that, you're gonna need to reschedule. What do you mean? Unless you have some secret means of speaking with her that you haven't revealed to me yet. No, not with her. Lewin heard Fel starting to pour something. Tea, maybe. Then you won't be able to reach her either. Believe me, I've tried. Sent her more requests for a meeting than I can count. Went straight to her office, you name it, but nothing's worked. No one knows where she is, said Jadzia. So, what about Ajani? Ajani has no official capacities in the school, so he couldn't appoint someone or invite them in as a professor. So there's got to be another reason that he's there. And it is clear that he's at least pretending at some sort of professional professor-type level, because we get a brief description of his office. This quote comes from Off the Record. Professor Zarek's office shed no light on the dark corners of his character. A glorified closet, its bookshelves stood mostly empty, as did the wooden desk dominating the space. The instructor lounged in a high-backed leather chair, while Jalessa sat primly across from him, her recording prism hovering between them, notebook open on her lap, Esmem propped up on the wall next to her. So he has an office, we get to see that, but his office leaves a little to be desired. No personal effects, a reference to a couple of books maybe, a desk that has nothing on it, and a very small room. It's almost as if he found an unused corner and set something up to pretend. So again, we're surrounded with this mystery about him being there. What this presents us with is a Ral Zarek that is manipulating his situation to make himself seem authentic. This is not like the personality of the Ral Zarek that we know. But, I can hear you say, it's just the Echoverse version of Ral Zarek. Obviously, he's manipulative in this universe. Okay, let's talk about that for a moment. At MagicCon Amsterdam, more information about the upcoming Fractured Reality set was revealed. What we've learned is that these echo characters are the actual characters that we know and love, but have gone through a different history which has changed who they are as a person. If you look at Liliana Vess didn't lose her brother, thus never got into necromancy, and became a profound healer, which is why Liliana is white as opposed to black. It's still Liliana, it's just she went through different stuff. Let's take a look at Ral Zarek's history, though. If this is the case, Ral Zarek was raised on Ravnica. He lived on the streets for a while, and he was manipulated and used by Nicobolus for various work and services. Most of Ral Zarek's manipulative capabilities, not that we see a lot of that in the main stories, comes from his influence from Nicobolus. But Jace has removed Nicobolus from reality, so why would Echoverse Ral Zarek be much more manipulative? Unfortunately, we can't answer this question until Fractured Realities comes out, but I would propose that that's not the case, that this isn't the Ral Zarek from the Echoverse, because I think that Ral Zarek's going to be much different than what we have here. And now it's time to get into who I think this actually is, and I've been sort of foreshadowing like the writers for the story have as to who it is. It is none other than Nicobolus himself. Let's unpack this. First, Nicobolus was last seen back on Tarkir Dragonstorm. The writers went out of their way to make sure that whatever Jace was doing, it required setting up a situation where Nicobolus got free. The last we heard about Nicobolus comes from Lorwyn Eclipsed, Episode 2, Shake Off Slumber. In that chapter, Ajani shows up at the Strixhaven Academy to provide some information about what's happened. He lets Liliana know that Jace has died, and he also goes on to tell her about the state of Nicobolus. Here's the quote. Liliana, another pause, another swallow. There's something else I have to tell you. The storms racked the meditation realm. They ripped through everything, and Jace lied. When he let you go to Ravnica, he let Ugin capture Bolus at the same time, and allowed us all to think that he had died. So Nicobolus escaped. Her teacup shattered as it hit the floor. He used an omen path. We don't know whether his spark is intact, and even if it is, he doesn't know where you are, but you needed to know. The important line here is he doesn't know where you are. Why is it so important in Lorwyn Eclipsed to have Ajani tell Liliana about the fate of Nicobolus? We don't see every character being told every detail. Liliana has this very strong and deep connection to Nicobolus, but is this conversation necessary? When it comes to writing, you want to cut information that is unnecessary. Kill the babies is the expression that a lot of writers use. You need to keep what matters in the story. So revealing the fact that Nicobolus has escaped to Liliana and that he doesn't know where she is was left in there on purpose. And at the time that they were speaking, that's probably the case. When you look at the motivation for Ral Zarek being on the realm, you start to see that it makes a lot of sense that it would be Nicobolus. It's not like Liliana's hiding the fact that she's a professor on Strixhaven. There's going to be people that are going to know this, and eventually Nicobolus is going to figure it out. Nicobolus is in the process of trying to recollect power because that's what he does. He collects power. So one of the first things that I would do if I was in his situation and I was back is I would hunt down Liliana. She betrayed me and I would want to address that. So why not take a trip to Strixhaven and pay her a visit? At the end of the Lorwyn Eclipse saga, though, Liliana leaves with white Liliana, and we don't know where. We also don't know why she was there. She could have very well have been there to warn her about something. But regardless, Liliana is no longer at the school when Nicobolus gets there. Well, Nicobolus has already come out here. What else could he do? When I was recapping the story, there was a detail that I intentionally left out because I wanted to go in depth with it here. And that's the book that Ral Zarek is after. Ral Zarek is looking for a book about the origin of the Elder Dragons on Strixhaven. And for those who don't know, the dragons are a unique creation in this world. It happens when two planes overlapped with each other, and at that central nexus point, a lot of energy was collected and released, birthing those 5 dragons. This is important. This is very important for what's going on here. Nicobolus would know about these dragons. Nicobolus would know that that's how they came into be. I mean, he is a true Elder Dragon, not the new definition of Elder Dragon that's been used in recent sets. So he's going to have this information. It's probably something that Ral Zarek himself wouldn't know. It's not quite as common knowledge. Also, in the story, it's quite clear that the Ral Zarek that we're interacting with already knew where this vault was. And he did manipulate the students to make it think that it was their idea, that what they were doing was supporting him. So Ral Zarek just wanted someone to do the dirty work for him and to spend their energy to go ahead and get into the vault, and them to be the distraction for the security guards while he gets what he's after and he leaves. This is shown by the fact that throughout the story, Ral uses very little of his magic. In fact, there's only 3 moments where he does anything of the sorts. There's the ritual in which he, quote-unquote, provides energy. Then there is the fight with the skeletons, which I'm going to come back to in a moment. And finally, there's just him planeswalking out. As I was preparing my notes for this, I noticed another detail back on the Ral Zarek guest lecturer card. In the card, throughout the art around Ral Zarek is inklings. Inklings are one of the magical concepts that exist within this school set, something that anyone can do. So why, if Ral Zarek has the capability of creating those inklings, then why was Ral Zarek in need of students to use their energy to figure out the maze path? Because the card lets us know clearly that this is something that Ral Zarek can do, or it wouldn't have been in the artwork. Again, if we assume that this is Nicobolus, it makes sense. Nicobolus likes to have other people do his dirty work for him. He was going to need his energy. He's trying to conserve his energy. He's power hungry. So he has the students do the work for him. Let's talk about the second time that magic is used. This happens when the skeletons come to life and are threatening Esmond, Ral Zarek, and Jalessa. In this situation, they start getting caught and grabbed. Ral Zarek helps one of them up. We get to see Esmond use their magic to go ahead and fry one of the skeletons. And then Professor Zarek says something. "I don't have time for this," Professor Zarek snapped. "Get through the maze, you two. I'll have a word with these pests." And that's it. We don't hear anything else more. We don't look back. We don't show anything about what happened, what he did to address the situation. And we're talking about Ral Zarek, somebody whose magic is incredibly obvious. Which brings up another point. At no point in the entire story do we get to see Ral Zarek's wonderful famous device, the electrostatic accumulator. In all of the writing that I've ever encountered with Raul Zarek, this device is brought up regularly. Go back to the War of the Spark, and quite consistently throughout the story, Raul's checking on the percentage levels of his device. It's not there. It's not mentioned, and we certainly don't hear lightning bolts being shot from his power. This is, again, too many clues. The concept in writing that I was telling you about, where there's lots of things that are put in place to give you evidence that it is someone when it's not actual evidence. It's meant to mislead. Almost a red herring of sorts, though it's not a true red herring. We are seeing the use of magic, but not seeing the use of magic. It's being withheld to us, the reader. It's a great use of a literary technique. They demonstrate a character without actually revealing what's really going on. So then we get inside of the vault. Nothing really matters too much in this situation other than the eagerness of Raul Zarek picks up to a very high level, very energetic. After he reveals that he's been manipulating him, though, we do get to see his magic one last time. That magic is described as this, quote, "Still smiling, Professor Zarek vanished in a swirl of shadow dotted with bursts of light." That is not what Raul Zarek's plane shifting looks like at all. His plane shifting looks like bolts of lightning and energy crackling in the air, the smell of ozone. That is not his power. Nicobolus, on the other hand, when he plane shifts, it's described as an actual tear in reality through the void, which is much closer to what this sounds like here. Pretty strong indication that this is, again, Nicobolus. Let's talk about a couple of other small buried clues now. These are small things that I've picked up on through the course of researching this. One that I think is very important is at one point in time when Raul Zarek is walking, he is described as cloak flaring like wings. He's also quoted as hissed syllables. These word choices are very particular. They could have been anything, but giving him wings, giving him a hissing sound to his syllables when he's using magic, that's foreshadow. That's what we called those buried clues that we were talking about earlier. It's, again, leading us to know that this is Nicobolus without making it immediately obvious. Let's talk about motivation now. Motivation's important. Everybody's got some motivation in what they do in life. So what's the motivation for our imposter Raul Zarek? Do we have any indication as to what it is? Well, there is a quote from the story that gives us a hint. Professor Zarek leaned back, stroking his beard, up and searching the biblioplex for a Blood Age tome about the birth of the Elder Dragons. It's referenced in a few places, but I can't find it. Why do you need it? Jalessa asked. His expression grew serious. I think the ley lines of Ravnica may have been destabilized by, well, me. It's a long story. Urkavios has unique ley line configurations that may provide insight and solutions. Okay, ley lines. We've got a motivation here. Let's look at Raul Zarek versus Nicobolus for a moment. What is Raul Zarek's interactions with the ley lines? There's two main points in his history where he involved in the ley lines of Ravnica. The first is early on he's working for Niv Mizzet and he's dealing with a Golgari. He ends up overcharging a mana battery, mana conduit, to use the ley lines to fry who he's fighting, which is definitely a strong manipulation of the ley lines in that situation. Later, the other interaction with the ley lines is when Raul Zarek is a part of the ritual to go ahead and bring Niv Mizzet back and turn him into the new guild pact for Ravnica. That's it. Now, we could say that yes, he did manipulate the ley lines, and that could have caused some damage to destabilize them, but we've not seen any indication of a concern in that front from Ral Zarek at all since that happened. Ral Zarek in the recent stories has had a different path of sorts that he's been working on. He last was in the process of chasing down Jace, which did not go the way that he wanted it to. But he learns that dragons are slipping through the Omen paths and are starting to appear in different planes, so he leaves to warn people about this. And that's the last we see of him in the main story, up until, of course, this off-the-record story. So it doesn't seem like him. It doesn't seem like his actual goal, his research that he'd be doing. But again, we know this isn't Ral Zarek. We're trying to figure out who this really is. And without knowing much about what's going on in Fractured Reality, what Jace is doing behind the scenes right now, it's hard to say if this is the Echoverse him, what his motivation would be. Other than there is aspects of the ley lines being utilized by this ritual, but in other stories of Secret of Strixhaven, and I'll get into one of those stories in a different video, we actually see that the magic has far surpassed ley lines. At this point, it's crossing planes, so it doesn't seem like the ley lines would matter too much. Now let's look at Nicobolus and his ley line interactions. First off, Nicobolus is a master of ley lines. He knows a lot about them. He manipulates them quite regularly. And on Ravnica, he did disrupt the ley lines. He quite literally severed them when he opened up the planar bridge during the War of the Spark. It cut the ley line in half and prevented them from using the guild pack to stop him. So yeah, he did literally mess up the ley lines. And I think that this is, again, another one of those buried clues as to revealing the true identity of who we're seeing here. And finally, we've got personality. I mean, let's be honest, Nicobolus is manipulative. He doesn't care if people die, he leaves them to die. He doesn't look back, like in the War of the Spark. He isn't even paying attention to the fighting that's going on around him because he's focused on what's in front of him, and was those sparks that were being pulled to him to give him power. And power, again, is important to him. And when you know that 5 dragons were created by 2 planes crashing together, and you want to get information about how that happened and maybe some information about how the ley lines might interact in that regard, it would make sense that he would track down that information while he happens to be in town to look for the missing Liliana. He didn't know that Liliana was gone. It's just very convenient that Liliana isn't there. And that's why I think from a literary standpoint, the story is very clearly making this out to be Nicobolus without making it obvious. You go back and you look. We have a Johnny shows up, tells Liliana, Jace is dead, Nicobolus is free. Then we have White Liliana show up and be like, hey, we gotta talk. And now that Liliana's not there, Ral Zarek shows up, and Liliana is conveniently not to be found anywhere, and that, again, is also brought up in the story. It's a key point that was included in the narratives of what was written. And it's to show us the timeline matches up and what he's doing. Nicobolus came to this realm, to this plane, to look for Liliana. Liliana wasn't there, and so Nicobolus decided to go and look for another source of information that could help him accumulate power, seeing as he's already there and he's already impersonating somebody that wouldn't stand out because he's a known associate of a Johnny and Liliana. That's it. That's the theory. I would love to hear how I'm wrong. I would love to hear evidence to say that this is not correct. I forward with all the red yarn, connecting all the dots together. I've been looking through so many different stories. Is it an Echoverse version of Ral Zarek? It could be. I'll find out when Reality Fracture comes out and we start seeing those lore drops. However, I think it's Nicobolus, and I think it's pretty obvious it's Nicobolus, and I will be sad if it isn't, because I was wrong. But I also don't mind being wrong, so please, in the comments, tell me why I'm wrong. Tell me why I'm wrong. I would like to end on two notes. First, YouTube is new to me. The audio quality, I'm sure, is terrible. The video quality, I'm sure, is terrible. If you like this, you want more, I will work on making it better, clean it up, better graphics, whatever it takes to make it look a lot more professional. This was just something I had to get off my chest and figure I'd share it with the internet on YouTube. I also want to end this video with a shout out. Valerie Valdes wrote a phenomenal story in Secrets of Strixhaven Off the Record. And I'm not just saying that because I really enjoyed the story. I need to give you a little bit of context. Shauna Maguire is my favorite author. I've been a fan of hers since she started writing the October Days series. So when I say that Secrets of Strixhaven Off the Record is by far my favorite piece of writing that I have seen in Magic, I really need to make sure that I'm being very clear about that. That is a huge kudos to her. This is a phenomenal story. I really hope you pick it up and read it if you haven't. And we really need to give more attention to these authors. They do an amazing job. Also, I just realized that they published it on my birthday, so that was funny, and I didn't know that until just now. Anyway, have a nice night. Bye!